Today we are examining the death of Joshua Doore Furniture. This is not a story about bankruptcy. This is a forensic analysis of corporate consolidation and strategic brand elimination. The red suspenders, the bald head, the warm smile that promised you had an uncle in the furniture business. For South Africans who grew up in the 1980s and 90s, the Joshua Doore brand represented something specific. Trust, affordability, access to furniture that your parents could finance on credit without shame. The uncle was family. He understood your budget. Today, those stores are gone. The signage has been replaced or removed entirely. In many cases, the buildings that once housed Joshua Doore now display the Russell's brand. Most South Africans who notice this assume the company simply failed. Bad management, changing consumer preferences, the natural death of an outdated retail model. That assumption is incorrect. Joshua Doore was not a failed business. It was a profitable brand that was deliberately dismantled as part of a larger corporate strategy. The uncle did not retire. He was retrenched by Steinhoff International, and the method of elimination was calculated, systematic, and entirely legal. Let me establish the timeline with precision. Joshua Doore was founded in 1973.
You've got an uncle in the furniture business, Joshua Doore. Joshua Doore.
The brand built its reputation during the 1980s and 90s as a furniture retailer targeting the mass market. Specifically, households in what marketers classify as living standards measure 4 through 7. Working class and lower middle class families who needed furniture but could not afford to pay cash up front. The business model was straightforward: sell furniture on credit, charge interest rates that reflected the risk profile of the customer base. The advertised rates were often around 24% annually. This was not predatory by the standards of the time. It was simply the cost of extending unsecured credit to consumers with limited financial histories. In 1986, Joshua Doore was acquired by Rasfin. 2 years later, in 1988, the brand was absorbed into David Sussman's JD Group. Under JD Group ownership, Joshua Doore expanded significantly. The credit model worked. Consumers needed furniture. Banks would not lend to them. Joshua Doore filled that gap and profited from it. By the 2000s, Joshua Doore had become a dominant player in South African furniture retail. The brand was not struggling. It was a cash-generating asset with strong market recognition and a loyal customer base. Then came 2012. Steinhoff International acquired the JD Group.
It's South Africa's biggest furniture retailer by revenue. JD Group's operational brands include Bradlow's, Joshua Doore, Markus, Russell's, Hi-Fi Corp, and Incredible Connection. JD Group has a market cap of 10.5 billion rand.
Steinhoff was a global conglomerate with operations across furniture, household goods, and retail. The company was run by Markus Jooste, a South African executive with an aggressive acquisition strategy. Steinhoff bought companies, consolidated operations, and extracted value. This was standard corporate behavior for a multinational of its scale. But the acquisition of JD Group coincided with a structural shift in the South African credit market. In 2014, African Bank, also known as ABIL, collapsed. African Bank was the primary lender for unsecured credit in South Africa. It had financed the consumption habits of millions of South Africans who could not access traditional bank loans. When African Bank failed, the entire unsecured credit ecosystem contracted. This had immediate consequences for furniture retailers. Joshua Doore's business model relied on extending credit to customers. If those customers could not access additional credit elsewhere, the risk of default increased. If default rates increased, the profitability of the credit book decreased. The furniture business was suddenly holding toxic debt. Steinhoff understood this. By 2016, Markus Jooste initiated what the company called a brand rationalization strategy. The language was corporate and neutral. The reality was brutal. Steinhoff announced it would close 251 stores and eliminate 4,110 jobs across its South African retail portfolio. Joshua Doore was a primary target, but the elimination was not immediate. Steinhoff deployed a method called dual branding. Joshua Doore stores were rebranded to carry both the Joshua Doore name and the Russell's name.
You've got an uncle in the furniture business, Joshua Doore and Russell.
This was presented to the market as a merger. Two trusted brands joining forces to serve customers better. In practice, it was a soft kill tactic. Dual branding allowed Steinhoff to transition customers away from the Joshua Doore identity without triggering alarm among shareholders or customers. The uncle was still there, technically, but he was sharing the storefront with Russell's. Over time, the Joshua Doore branding was reduced. Signage was updated. Marketing materials shifted. and eventually, the Joshua Doore name disappeared entirely. By the end of 2016, Joshua Doore as a standalone brand was effectively dead. The stores that remained were fully absorbed into the Russell's portfolio. The employees who had worked under the Joshua Doore banner were either retrenched or reassigned. The customers who had trusted the uncle for decades were told to trust Russell's instead. This was not a bankruptcy. There was no liquidation. There were no creditors seizing assets. This was a strategic decision by a parent company to eliminate a brand that no longer fit its portfolio strategy. And the method was designed to minimize negative publicity and shareholder concern. The context matters. Steinhoff was not acting irrationally. The African bank collapse had fundamentally changed the economics of credit-based furniture retail. Extending credit to high-risk consumers was no longer profitable in the way it had been during the 2000s. The regulatory environment had tightened. Default rates were climbing. The model that had sustained Joshua Doore for decades was no longer viable at scale.
I want to place on record that when I left Steinhoff on the 4th of December, I was not aware of any accounting irregularity, what they refer to in the books of Steinhoff.
From Steinhoff's perspective, consolidating Joshua Doore into Russell's made operational sense. Fewer brands meant lower marketing costs. Fewer store leases meant lower overhead. A single brand identity across the portfolio meant streamlined supply chains and centralized management. The dual branding strategy allowed them to execute this consolidation without triggering panic. But from a consumer perspective, the result was the loss of a brand that had served South African families for over 4 decades. The uncle was not just a mascot. He represented a specific relationship between retailer and customer. He acknowledged that you needed credit. He made that need feel normal rather than shameful. Russell's, by contrast, was a more corporate brand, less personal, less familial. The employees who lost their jobs in the rationalization were not abstract statistics. Many of those individuals had built careers within the Joshua Doore system. They understood the customer base. They knew how to sell furniture on credit to working-class families. Those skills became obsolete the moment Steinhoff decided the brand was redundant. And then came 2017. Steinhoff, the company that had eliminated Joshua Doore to optimize its portfolio, imploded. Markus Jooste resigned in December 2017 amid revelations of accounting fraud.
If you look at Steinhoff, it's quite a huge institution. Even though they are sitting in a quandary in the sense that there's lawsuits all over the place against Steinhoff. But we are looking at a situation where we are saying that not only Steinhoff as an institution, but the director of Steinhoff, they also need to be held accountable. We believe that their actions in the collapse of Steinhoff necessitates them to have individual liability for whatever that has happened.
The company had been inflating its asset values and profits for years. Steinhoff's share price collapsed. Investors lost billions. The fraud investigation revealed systematic manipulation across the entire organization.
What was the board doing? So you were the chairperson. German investigators were finding huge signs of fraud. Was the board completely in the dark for the more than a year that you were there?
I'm happy that you asked the question, Francis, because I and many other people have gone on record dozens of times to explain that when the first allegations against Jooste were made, the board of Steinhoff in December 2015, we appointed one of the most prominent forensic investigating firms in Germany, a firm called FGS, with a mandate to investigate every allegation made by the Oldenburg prosecutor in Germany and to report back to the board.
Joshua Doore had been absorbed into a conglomerate that was, itself, built on fraudulent foundations. The brand rationalization that killed the uncle was part of a broader strategy by executives who were simultaneously defrauding shareholders and regulators. The entire narrative of operational efficiency and portfolio optimization was occurring within a company engaged in one of the largest corporate frauds in South African history. This does not mean Joshua Doore would have survived if Steinhoff had not acquired JD Group. The African bank collapse was a real structural shift. Credit-based furniture retail faced genuine challenges regardless of ownership, but the method and timing of Joshua Doore's elimination were directly tied to Steinhoff's consolidation strategy. A strategy executed by leaders who were, at the same time, engaged in criminal deception. The lesson here is about the treatment of heritage brands within corporate consolidation. Joshua Doore was not a failing business in 2012 when Steinhoff acquired it. It was a profitable, recognizable brand with decades of market presence. But profitability alone does not protect a brand when a parent company decides it is redundant. From Steinhoff's perspective, Joshua Doore was a line item on a balance sheet, a brand with overlap in the portfolio, an opportunity for cost savings through consolidation. The sentimental value of the uncle, the decades of customer relationships, the employees who had built their careers there, these factors were irrelevant to the financial calculus. This is not unique to Steinhoff. This is how modern corporate consolidation functions. Multinational conglomerates acquire local brands, evaluate their fit within the broader portfolio, and eliminate redundancy. The fact that a brand has cultural significance or customer loyalty does not protect it from rationalization if the parent company determines it is economically redundant. The dual branding strategy used to eliminate Joshua Doore is particularly instructive. It demonstrates how a company can erase a brand without triggering public backlash. By gradually transitioning customers to a replacement brand under the guise of a merger, Steinhoff avoided the negative headlines that would have accompanied a sudden closure. The method was effective precisely because it was incremental and framed as consolidation rather than elimination. And the timing was deliberate. The African bank collapse provided cover. Steinhoff could point to the broader credit market challenges and argue that consolidation was a necessary response to changing conditions. The fact that they were simultaneously engaged in accounting fraud does not negate the external pressures facing credit-based retailers, but it does complicate the narrative of responsible corporate stewardship. For the customers who had trusted Joshua Doore for decades, the transition to Russell's was not seamless. Brand loyalty is not easily transferred. The uncle represented a specific identity. Russell's did not carry the same associations. Many customers simply stopped shopping at those stores once the Joshua Doore branding disappeared. They did not consciously boycott Russell's. They simply felt no connection to it. This is the human cost of brand rationalization. It is measured not in job losses alone, but in the erosion of customer relationships and community connections. Joshua Doore was embedded in working-class South African life for over 4 decades. It was where families bought their first couches, where teenagers chose bedroom furniture before leaving home, where newly married couples furnished their first apartments. Those memories do not transfer to a corporate brand with no historical continuity. The broader implications extend beyond Joshua Doore. This pattern of acquisition, consolidation, and brand elimination is occurring across South African retail. Local brands with decades of history are being absorbed into multinational portfolios and either rebranded or eliminated entirely. The justification is always operational efficiency. The result is always homogenization. And in the case of Steinhoff, the entire consolidation strategy was occurring within a fraudulent corporate structure. The executives making these rationalization decisions were simultaneously inflating asset values and deceiving shareholders. The credibility of their strategic judgment is therefore compromised by the criminal nature of their broader conduct. Joshua Doore did not fail. It was not outcompete. It was not bankrupted by poor management. It was absorbed into a global conglomerate that determined it was redundant and executed a methodical elimination strategy. The uncle did not retire. He was retrenched. His red suspenders and warm smile were replaced by the generic branding of a consolidated retail portfolio. This is the autopsy. The cause of death was corporate consolidation and strategic brand rationalization. The victim was a heritage brand with over 40 years of market presence and customer loyalty. The method was dual branding and gradual erasure. The executioner was Steinhoff International, a company that would itself collapse under the weight of accounting fraud less than 2 years after eliminating Joshua Doore. The uncle had promised that you had family in the furniture business, but when Steinhoff bought that business, the promise became obsolete. Corporate portfolios do not have uncles. They have brands, margins, and rationalization strategies. And when a brand no longer fits the strategy, it disappears. Quietly, incrementally, efficiently. Joshua Doore is gone. The stores are rebranded. The employees are scattered. The customers have moved on or stopped shopping entirely. What remains is a case study in how heritage brands are treated as expendable assets within multinational consolidation. The uncle was never family. He was intellectual property. And when that property lost its value to the parent company, it was liquidated. This has been SA Autopsies, forensic analysis of the corporate decisions that erased the brands we grew up with. We will continue documenting these eliminations because understanding the method is the first step to recognizing when your nostalgia is being rationalized out of existence.